Welcome to Random Flyer, the podcast that brings you the true stories of New Zealand's airline history. Today, we're looking at the McDonnell Douglas DC-10 and its service with Air New Zealand, becoming the backbone of the airline internationally, flying to Australia, America, Asia, and Europe. Almost all of them went on to lead second lives flying for European charter airlines, French carriers, and even government and military transport units. These are their stories. Development of the DC-10 began in 1966 as the result of a specification from American Airlines for a twin-engine, wide-body aircraft, smaller than the Boeing 747 yet capable of flying similar long-range routes from airports with shorter runways. The DC-10, now the McDonnell Douglas DC-10, made its first flight on 29 August 1970. In August 1970, Air New Zealand received government approval for the purchase of 3 McDonnell Douglas DC-10 Series 30 aircraft, which cost, along with spares and support equipment, around $90 million. In competing for Air New Zealand's selection, the plane was up against the Boeing 747 and the Lockheed L-1011 TriStar, but the better operating economics and operational support offered by McDonnell Douglas provided a deal too good to ignore for the airline. The Series 30 DC-10 was the middle of the 3 variants produced and was the longest ranging of the 3 with the highest maximum nominal payload. They were powered by the General Electric CF6-50 C2 high bypass turbofan engines. The Air New Zealand DC-10 fleet came online between January 1973 and November 1977, and they started leaving in the early 1980s as the larger Boeing 747-200Bs came in to replace them, being either sold or leased out to other airlines until they were finally disposed of by Air New Zealand in the mid-1980s. The final Air New Zealand DC-10 service flew towards the end of 1982. ZK-NZL was the first of 3 DC-10s ordered by Air New Zealand on August 1970 and was first flown from the Douglas plant in Long Beach, California on 26 October 1972. It was formally accepted there by Air New Zealand on 11 January 1973 and arrived in Auckland at the end of its delivery flight at the end of January. It operated its first revenue service in Auckland to Sydney run on 3 February 1973. It served with the airline before being withdrawn from use on 21 October 1981 and was stored at Auckland Airport. It was then sold into the American market in 1981 where it became N136AA with American Airlines. Its final years were short-lived as it was written off at Dallas-Fort Worth Airport on 21 May 1988 when the plane was destroyed following an aborted takeoff and runway overrun. The crew of American Airlines Flight 70 rejected the takeoff at 166 knots, following a slat disagree light and takeoff warning horn. NZL ran off the end of runway 35 left at 95 knots and the nose gear collapsed. Contributing to the accident were the condition of the brakes, which on inspection were found to have been degraded by wear. No fatalities were sustained by the 240 passengers and 14 crew on board at the time, but 2 crew were severely injured. NZL was written off, age 16 years. ZK-NZM was a DC-10 Series 30 and first flown from the Douglas facility at Long Beach on 13 July 1973. It was accepted by Air New Zealand there in September 1973 and landed in Auckland at the end of its delivery flight on Sunday 15 September 1973. NZM served with Air New Zealand for several years before being withdrawn from service in July 1982 and prepared for sale to American Airlines as N137AA. It continued in service with American before being withdrawn from them 31 October 2000. The aircraft was ferried to Mojave, entering storage there on 7 November 2000. Work commenced on the aircraft in preparation for an intended sale to a Nigerian airline, but that sale was cancelled. The aircraft and engines were repossessed by GA Telesis Turbine Technologies in April 2002, and NZM was declared permanently withdrawn from use and broken up in January 2004 at Mojave, age 31 years. ZK-NZN was first flown at Long Beach on 6 December 1973 and was accepted by Air New Zealand there on 18 January 1974. NZN arrived in Auckland on completion of its delivery flight on Saturday 19 January 1974. It was leased to Malaysia Airlines System in 1978 and returned to Air New Zealand. It was then sold to ILFC in April 1981 and leased to Western Airlines, registered there as N821L and named the Londoner. The lease was transferred to Air Pacific in September 1983 and then on to American Airlines in January 1985, where it was registered N144AA. It was withdrawn from American Airlines use on 13 December 2000 and stored at Mojave, where it was broken up in November 2003, aged 30 years. ZK-NZP was first flown at Long Beach on November 8, 1974 and was accepted by Air New Zealand on December 13, 1974. It arrived in Auckland on completion of its delivery flight on Saturday, 14 December 1974. NZP served exclusively with Air New Zealand until it was tragically lost in the Erebus disaster. On 28 November 1979, during a scenic Antarctic flight, it crashed into Mount Erebus in whiteout after being flown on an incorrect navigational track. All 257 people on board were killed. The Erebus disaster and ZK-NZP remains one of the most significant and devastating losses in the New Zealand airline history. ZK-NZQ was a DC-10 Series 30 and first flown at Long Beach on 8 January 1975. NZQ was accepted by Air New Zealand at the Douglas plant on February 20, 1975 and arrived in Auckland at the end of its delivery flight on Friday, 21 February 1975 and served with Air New Zealand until being withdrawn from use there and stored at Auckland Airport in September 1982. It was sold to American Airlines and subsequently leased to them from Polaris Leasing as N138AA. It was withdrawn from use by American in October 1993 and ferried to storage in November and was formally returned to Polaris in 1995. In January 1996, it was re-registered as N14074 and leased to Continental Airlines, but was returned to Polaris Leasing in August 2001. NZQ was withdrawn from use and stored at Mojave from that date and was broken up there in 2008, age 33 years. ZK-NZR was first flown on 22nd August 1975 and accepted by Air New Zealand at the Douglas plant on 2nd October 1975. NZR arrived in Auckland at the end of its ferry flight on Friday, 3rd of October 1975. NZR remained with Air New Zealand until being withdrawn from service there on December 18, 1982. It was stored at Auckland Airport before being sold to ILFC. With ILFC, it was leased to LAM Mozambique and registered FGDJK. Withdrawn from use and placed in open storage in Paris on 15 April 1992. It was then leased to Air Martinique on 22 May 1992, but was damaged and withdrawn from service at Guadeloupe, east of Puerto Rico, on 10 October 1993. NZR was repaired and returned to service with AOM French Airlines as FGNDC in December 1993. It served briefly with Cubana from 1995 to 1997, and then AOM Minerve from April 1997. It went to Air Liberté in March 2001 and was withdrawn from use on 22 September 2001 to be stored at Marcel Dassault Airport in France, where it was broken up in 2004, age 29 years. ZK-NZS was first flown at Long Beach on 29 April 1976 and was accepted by Air New Zealand there on 6th of June. It arrived in Auckland on completion of its delivery flight on Tuesday, 9 June 1976. It operated its first revenue service, which was Auckland, Honolulu, Los Angeles, London, on 19 June 1976. NZS was leased briefly to Malaysia Airlines System from March till August 1978 before being returned to Air New Zealand. That December, operating TE-103 from Fiji to Auckland, the crew became aware that the pilot of a Cessna 188 had become lost over the Pacific Ocean while trying to find Norfolk Island. The DC-10's crew managed to locate the Cessna and lead it to Norfolk Island, where it made a safe landing. From 1979 till 1986, NZS was leased out, first to National Airlines and then to LAN Chile as CJS. It was returned to Air New Zealand in July 1986 and was then sold to ILFC. With ILFC, it operated for SAS Scandinavian Airlines as SEDFH until October 1990, when it was sold to French airline Air Outremer as FODLY. NZS swapped between AOM French Airlines and Cabana several times until it was withdrawn from use and stored at Havana in February 2003, where it is currently preserved as a training aid. ZK-NZT was the last of the McDonnell Douglas DC-10s ordered by Air New Zealand and was first flown at Long Beach on 22 July 1977 and was accepted by Air New Zealand on 10 November 1977. NZT arrived in Auckland on the completion of its delivery flight on Friday, 11 November. NZT remained active with Air New Zealand until being withdrawn from service and prepared for lease to LAN Chile in May 1982 as CJT. NZT was returned to Air New Zealand in March 1986 and then sold to American Airlines, where it was registered N164AA. It remained with them until being withdrawn from use on 20 November 2000 and was stored at Mojave. It was purchased by Pegasus Aviation in June 2001 and ferried to Pinal Park, where it was broken up in 2009, aged 31 years. During the early 1980s, the DC-10s were phased out as the Boeing 747-200Bs entered service. Air New Zealand's final DC-10 service was flown by ZK ZK-NZR from Hong Kong to Auckland on 2nd November 1983.